Hi friend, I am Brooke Cormier if we haven't met before, and welcome to this video. Despite being a full-time painter, if you've watched any of my other videos before, you probably already know that I have a lot of hobbies and a lot of interests. One of which is, you guessed it, gardening. When my partner and I moved into this apartment in Toronto a couple years ago, I was so excited to finally have an outdoor space to myself. We live on the second floor of a house, and right off of the kitchen there is kind of like a glorified fire escape, which is actually pretty spacious and doubles as a nice little terrace. If you don't know, I have a degree in landscape architecture, but I never really ended up using it because I started painting full-time right after I graduated. So I'd like to think that I'm exercising some of those muscles again with my wee little terrace gardening projects. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my terrace transformation as I take it from the dump that it was in April to the pollinator paradise that it is now in July. Last year was the first year that I had a garden of my own, and I wanted to enjoy it for as long as possible. But before I knew it, it was snowing, everything was frozen, and I had to go into hibernation. So I didn't end up cleaning everything up at the end of the season, which is why I'm doing it in April. What was my experience last year as being a first-time garden mama? Well, it was wonderful, but also very distressing. First of all, I bought way too many plants, which by the end of the season was a bit overwhelming and a lot of maintenance, not to mention a lot of money, especially since I was buying annuals. Those are the ones that don't come back the next year. Okay, I lied. I actually bought one perennial, though I didn't know it at the time. It's called Creeping Jenny, and I was surprised to see its little green sprouts in the springtime. So here I am digging it up and repotting it because at this point I don't know if/where I want to use it this year. Another thing I had to learn the hard way is just how frequently a container garden such as this needs to be watered. I don't really notice it while I'm home because I just love taking care of the garden and I'm constantly checking the soil and giving all my plants a little drink. But last summer I went away for a couple weeks and I kind of organized the watering of the plants last minute, and turned out it wasn't enough. I had my landlord, my friend, and my mom all help me with the watering, which is actually a pretty big job since I don't have a hose and it requires multiple trips of filling the heavy watering can in the bathtub. So I'm very grateful that they agreed to help me, but by the time I got back, the garden was in pretty rough shape. Some plants took weeks to fully bounce back and others completely bit the dust. So this year, I've certainly got to be more organized while I'm away.
I think we do.
It's finally clean! This was an entire day's work, but very satisfying to have it all cleaned up and ready for this year's planting. I'd already been doing some brainstorming in the winter months about what I imagined for the garden this year. Last year I went a little overboard with the color scheme, so this year I decided to go with a classic and elegant purple and white situation. I kept a record of all the plants I grew last year, which did well, which didn't, which ones were my favorites. So using that as a rough guide, I made a little planting plan sketch. I've learned not to be too strict with this because I usually end up straying from it once I get to the garden center anyway. I recently got a Costco membership, and thought I would check out what's available before heading to the other garden centers. This was my first time bringing my camera out in public, so I was pretty nervous. I did my best to hide it under my coat, but it looked very creepy, so I hope nobody saw. In typical Costco fashion, I ended up buying way more than I originally planned for. I guess I didn't really consider that everything is sold in bulk here, including the plants. So even though I only wanted 6 petunias, they only came in flats of 18. So naturally I overcommitted myself again. I ended up buying probably close to 40 extra plants. There's just something about garden centers that make me so trigger happy. I really need to learn how to contain myself. FYI, these ferns are not for me. They were for my mom for Mother's Day. And if you're wondering what I did with all the extra plants, I made some nice planters for my parents, sister, and friends, and then all the rest I planted in my parents' garden, which is another project I am managing this year. Anyway, I was very happy that they sold giant bags of soil at Costco. I got a pretty good deal on this big guy. You wouldn't think that dirt would be expensive, but here we are. And of course, I couldn't leave without trying as many free samples as possible. There were a few special plants I wanted that Costco didn't sell, so even though I already had way too many plants, I stopped at another garden center on the way home and bought some more because nobody was there to stop me. I bought some herbs and some other flowers and packed the car, which was completely full. I had to be very cautious while driving with all my little babies in the back seat. And on May 22nd, I had my big planting day. I was experimenting a bit with the soil this year. I didn't buy enough to completely fill all my containers, so what I did was mix some of the existing soil from last year with some compost and some new potting mix. And we're just gonna see how it goes. Another distressing thing I forgot to mention earlier about my garden last year were
the squirrels.
I used to like squirrels until I moved to Toronto. And the reason for that is that they terrorized me and my garden every single day. I'm not even kidding. Last year, I was so excited to start gardening. I spent so much time, energy, and money planting the whole thing. And the next day, I woke up to enjoy my little outdoor oasis, and it looked like a war zone. There were uprooted plants lying all over the floor, flowers decapitated, dirt everywhere. I was horrified. That summer, I researched and tried every squirrel proofing tactic in the book to no avail. Chili powder, peppermint oil, human hair, coffee grounds. I even hand sharpened these little wooden skewer spikes to stick in the soil. And every morning I would wake up to at least one limp little plant lying helplessly beside its pot. I can't tell you how many tears were shed over this issue last year. Honestly, it's embarrassing. But halfway through the summer, I finally tried something that actually sort of worked, and that was chicken wire. Only a physical barrier would stop these demons. So this year, I made sure that I secured the chicken wire as soon as I planted everything, so the young plants had a chance to spread their roots early with no disruptions. Basically, I cut pieces of chicken wire and then made these little U-shaped stakes to secure them on top of the soil. Doing this to every planter took ages, but it's worth it. And to my surprise, the squirrels have actually been much more forgiving this year. Maybe the population died back over the winter or something, which honestly is a good thing. Not to sound evil or anything, but I felt like this property was infested last year. We live next to a park, and I swear anytime you looked around, you could spot at least 17 squirrels. Anyway, my plants are much happier this year, and so am I. I am excited to show you guys what the garden looks like over a month later. I know you're probably all at the edge of your seat with excitement right now, but first, I'd like to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Being a self-taught artist and someone with a million hobbies, I am all about self-teaching, and Skillshare is a great place to start when you're learning any new skill. Take gardening, for example. I recently watched Lauren Weber's course called Planting Your Inspiration, Seasonal Container Gardening, and it really resonated with me because it was all about finding inspiration for your artwork from your self-planted container garden. It gave me a lot of really helpful tips, not only about the technical part of gardening, but also emphasizing how gardening is such a creative process where you can source a lot of inspiration from. And Lauren is an artist with a degree in landscape architecture. What do you know? On Skillshare, there are classes on how to build a creative career, marketing and diversifying your income, and personal branding, and just all the things that give you greater control over your career path, whatever that might be. This year, I really wanted to make more time for the things that fulfill me, and Skillshare's productivity and time management course has been a really great tool for allowing me to do that. So if this sounds like something that you would be interested in, the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description below will get 1 month free of Skillshare. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. My first sponsor. Now, for the moment you've all been waiting for. I am going to take you on a little tour of my garden now that we are pretty much halfway through the summer. So please join me on the terrace for this riveting floral experience. Hello AD, welcome to my garden. This fire escape was built in 2011 by French architect Jean. So as you can see, the garden is looking quite lush. It is now July 5th, so it's been like a month and a half since I planted everything, and I'm very happy with how it feels, how it looks. I basically have all my meals out here now, weather permitting. Got my coffee out here in the morning. We have dinner on this little table. Usually we have 2 chairs right here, but for the purpose of the tour, I have moved those out of the way. Even when the weather is not permitting, it's still beautiful out here. It's beautiful even in a thunderstorm. Cut to the B-roll footage of the thunderstorm. One of my favorite parts about being out here in the garden is the birds and the bees, which come to visit every day. The birds are constantly flying around and they take rest here and there, and they take little bits of the cocoa liner in my baskets for their nest, and I like to think that I'm just helping them out, you know? Build a nice sturdy nest with my cocoa liner. Why don't you? And my landlords who live below us have a nice bird bath that I also enjoy watching when I'm out here having my coffee in the morning and just seeing them splish splash around. You know, that makes me happy. The bees love the bacopa down here, which is why I planted it. Again, I had a lot of bacopa in my garden last year, and those pollinators were just all over it, so I said, hey, let's bring it back. Let's bring back the bacopa. Okay, moving on over here is where the herb section of the garden is. Last year, I only had flowers, which I think is beautiful, but a little bit useless. This year, we've got some useful things, and they are also flourishing. Look at how big this purple basil is. Why would I get regular basil when I could get purple basil? Me and the cameraman are gonna make some purple pesto at the end of the season, so we're looking forward to that. The parsley is doing very well. It is pretty much taking over the entire planter. The cilantro, I think I didn't cut properly, and now it's... Anyway, I'm not gonna show you that. I also hung up these little Dollarama lanterns here using zip ties, and they're very cute. It creates a very nice ambiance in the evening time when you're sitting out here having a glass of wine, you know, enjoying the sounds of the city. This hanging basket is doing very well, and I'm glad to see that the creeping Jenny that I transplanted at the beginning of the year is flourishing, and it's just gonna keep on growing, and it's gonna look beautiful. Hey, maybe I'll have to do another gardening YouTube video at the end of the growing season. Give me a thumbs up if you want that. Maybe... Caring for this garden brings me a lot of joy. Like the mundane tasks of watering and deadheading do not seem mundane because I actually enjoy it a lot. I like to nurture the plants that I have planted. And it's very peaceful. Gardening is peaceful, and I would recommend that. I would recommend gardening to anybody. Even if you don't have a green thumb, you know? Just give it your best shot. This terrace and this little garden is like an extension of my living space. And especially here in Canada, when the winters are long and cold and treacherous, we have to maximize our time out here in the warmer months, which is why I put a lot of effort into making this a beautiful and comfortable space that I want to spend time in. Okay, 3 tips that I would give every gardener. I would say do your research because
Squirrels!
Do your research because when it comes to like shade tolerance and that kind of stuff, you gotta know your property, you gotta know where the plants are gonna do well. You can't just plant things wherever you want. No willy-nilly planting over here. We got to be strategic. Another tip, filler thriller. I mean, that's a given. You can find that on any middle-aged woman blog post. Is that rude to say? And what's the 3rd tip? Be diligent with your watering. And patience. Oh. Patience. Patience is actually a big one. Thank you, cameraman, for that tip, because patience I didn't have a lot of before because I would overplant everything. I want everything to look super nice and full right off the bat, but guess what? The plants are gonna get bigger, they're gonna fill out, and then they're gonna overcrowd. So you gotta be patient. Let the plants grow, let them thrive, nurture them. The end. Thank you so much for joining me in my garden tour in the entire process. I am grateful that you kept me company during that whole thing. I hope that you learned something. I hope that maybe you feel inspired to start your own garden because it's worth it, you guys. It's worth it. So if you like the video, consider subscribing to the channel or giving it a thumbs up. Tell me how you eliminate squirrels from your garden. That would be very valuable information. Okay, I'm Britt Cormier, and I'll see you next time.